Hi everyone, my name is Yordan. I'm the Security Operations Center for ExpressVPN, and today I'll be speaking about beyond security operations. I know that we're coming out of a lunch break, and this can be classified as the graveyard shift in the afternoon hours, but I'll try my best to keep everybody entertained for the next 30 minutes. So, I had a slide specifically for an intro, but I think I'd do a disservice for, our guest speaker over here who pretty much presented me. Pretty much my fields of expertise are threat intelligence and DFIR, and hobbies obviously include cats, as you will likely see in the following slides. Who we are as ExpressVPN Security, we have 3 dedicated functions in security engineering, offensive security, and the SOC, where I've listed out some competitions and highlights from the last few years where we've participated in CTFs, where actually from today, our team participated in this year's Splunk Boss of the SOC, and we got 4th place out of 86 teams in pretty much the Asia region. I've included some references to our blog, where we've published information about vulnerabilities that we found about different products and different types of knowledge-based articles, if you want to read more, and we'll go to one of them later on today. So today we'll cover what traditional SOC operations look like versus the future of SOC or SOC of the future, which many of you might have heard. Google and Deloitte kind of partnered up and they analyzed what are some of the common issues that security operations centers kind of feel on a daily basis and how there might be some scalability issues. We'll look at what security operations as a service is, and we'll go through intelligence, threat modeling, threat hunting, automation, and we'll take a look at a case study using a world-renowned company that I'm sure that all of you know. But before this, it's story time, and let's take a look at a story about recognized versus unrecognized threats. I want you all to picture yourself in a big cosmopolitan city like Bucharest, New York, London, for example, and you're making your way back home, and you have to cross a dark alley where there is a night lamp and it's kind of shining a circle of light on the ground, and inside the light you can see maybe a dumpster or like a cat or a person. But the question is, how much of objective reality does the circle of light represent and all the threats that hide behind the surface? Or could there be somebody waiting behind with maybe a knife and having their different types of threats that we don't see? We kind of experience this in the security industry. We know about malware, we know about kind of cloud security now, third-party risk, ransomware. We've heard about APT groups. We've heard about some today as well, whether it's your pandas, your bears, your spiders, whatever they might not be. But how confident are we in saying that we are capable of defending against them 100% of the time? How confident are we in saying in us being able to prevent the next supply chain breach, right? We all experienced the Log4j kind of event, and that was fun, and that was around Christmas, so I'm waiting for the next one to show up. So obviously this is as well the confirmed wizard spider ringleader based on what Interpol has personally told me. And to kind of illustrate this, I wanted to give an example of something that we've experienced some time ago, where a year ago our bug bounty vendor told us that we had an email hijack vulnerability that effectively represented a 4th-party risk, which we've never heard before. But effectively, we were using a SaaS provider that told us to configure some DNS records for marketing and analytics, which could be used on their third party to register an account that, due to account validation problems, allowed for email hijacking. Turns out when you set DNS CNAME records, they also inherit MX and TXT records, which is perfect for passing SPF, which is all that was required pretty much for the 4th-party provider. And we also managed to find out an undocumented SMTP feature flag that allowed us to completely bypass not just for the subdomain, but also for our top-level domain in sending emails from our billing account. We signaled this to the vendor, and they managed to remediate it, so that was a good success story. But what happens if it's not a bug bounty submission? What happens if it's actually exploited in the wild? How do we fight these threats? In the traditional model, we'd have kind of some form of vendor tool-driven triage. We'd have the follow-the-sun models or different ones, level 1, 2, 3 analysts with SOPs and dedicated incident response engagement procedures. We'd have some form of intel vendors feeding us maybe atomic IOCs like hashes, domains, IPs. And we'd have some form of asset inventory system that may not be real-time. It's not perfect, but it's useful, right? And maybe even in the hybrid SOC model where we would delegate some of those operational components to different vendors. what I'm going to be pretty much highlighting today is what Google and Deloitte partnered up to analyze in effectively creating the SOC of the future, where they're focusing on operationalizing intelligence, threat modeling, agile DevSecOps, leveraging machine learning and data analytics, doing threat hunting, and I've added continuously for a reason there, investing in people and their skills, not tiers, and prioritizing diversity over completeness with some form of structured procedural maturity, but not too much to stifle creativity, and obviously the king of all types of enablers, automation, orchestration, and so on. With asterisk, you see some of the things that we will cover today. So nothing is perfect. Every single model has its pluses and minuses. In the traditional one, it's well-established guidelines. We have enterprise-ready solutions that can offer support and turnkey solutions. We can use a divide and conquer strategy with level 1, 2, 3 analysts. But more often than not, we have SOC fatigue building up. We have a never-ending corpus of alerts that's been just developed. People lack the strategic visibility because they're so caught up in just responding to tickets all the time that they just can't dig deeper. We also, unfortunately, in the industry are seen as a compliance type of institution, organization where we're seen as the bad people and not as an enabler and a team that wants to make others successful. The SOC of the future model is slightly different. It's a lot more objective key result focused. It's around scalability, flexibility, metrics. It offers tactical and operational insights that build that big picture, and it's closer to the software development lifecycle. Obviously, there's nothing that's perfect out there, and there is a steep learning curve in kind of transitioning to that, model of operating. And at the same time, you're kind of at the bleeding edge of, process ingenuity. You're on your own. You won't find anything on page 10 of Google or Stack Overflow and how to transform yourself towards this. And there is a certain type of org-level mindset shift that's required to make security be effectively the responsibility of everyone. So, I wanted to show originally some wins and losses that we might be able to share with everyone, but somebody told me no, so I decided to pick for the next best option, which is ACME Corp and their latest and greatest Dynamite as a Service. As you all know, they're a leading company in the explosive industry. They're looking to revolutionize the health and safety protocols of mining, quarrying, and construction. They have a huge list of Fortune 500 customers and a sizable B2C market share. And they offer a new IoT device, which is a remote detonation one, which also integrates with SCADA systems and sensor networks, and it's all in the cloud and with a mobile app, because why not? They are compliant with all conceivable compliance frameworks, so what could potentially go wrong, right? And let's take a look at their network. They're all in AWS. They have some form of microservices for marketing, front-end APIs. They have a back-end kind of processing system, centralized CI/CD, some form of peripheral EC2 instance that Gary from marketing apparently is using. Who knows why? They have a corporate internet where they're testing their products and software, and they have a lot of remote detonation devices that effectively connect to the centralized CloudFront environment and a lot of users from all sorts of devices, including apparently a TV, because, why not? Every good victim has their own adversary, and today's adversary is the Goodbye Kitty APT group, believed to be associated with a Middle Eastern threat actor. Historic evidence of conducting large-scale brute forcing credential stuffing for post-exploitation. They preferentially target critical infrastructure companies in the West, and they employ destructive capabilities such as ransomware. In the first stages of an attack, they use, living off the land, more generic malware, and afterwards they bring in the big guns, more sophisticated malware for post-exploitation, and they're apparently associated with the Roadrunner APT group. So what happened, right? Turns out that the Goodbye Kitty APT group has been targeting, ACME Corp for a while. They tried sending some mouse spam, and it kind of didn't work. It was blocked by the email security gateway. They tried more targeted lures, but the EDR solution caught them. And they tried doing some scanning and exploitation, but the web application firewalls kind of blocked them, so no bueno there, right? But turns out that they used a fast-flux botnet to compromise some of the developer accounts on their front-facing login page, which they found out that they can be reused on their version control software, which was publicly exposed as well, from where they found some secrets in commit history for different repositories, which they used to laterally move to the AWS environment, the Kubernetes cluster, and the API pod from where they scheduled a remote detonation for all customer devices, right? So is that everything that could have happened, or what if Gary's device was compromised to breach the internet? What if an adversary bought the actual product and reverse engineered it to see how they can detonate it remotely from the network? What if a developer's workstation was compromised with some of the lures that went through and their AWS profile secrets were stolen? Or what if their CI/CD was used to laterally move to the environment regardless of there being no credentials? Or what if there was an insider that sold access to their environment, or maybe a latest dependency that pulled, a Trojanized version of a Python package that was just poisoned in a supply chain attack, right? There's many, many different options and things that could have gone wrong. So let's rewind the tape and let's look at how they could have done better. So ACME Corporation went back in time as well before this ever happened, and they created a security operations pipeline which they offered as a service to all their customers, which go through the funnel, and effectively they produce different types of solutions and software, which is a lot more security hardened as they proceed to each step. Now, full disclosure, we'll go to the last four, which are on intelligence development, threat modeling, hunting, and detection engineering, but those are effectively talks that can be multi-hour long, so I've tried to make them as practical and example-driven as possible, but bear with me. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take any after. And we'll start with intelligence, right? We've all heard about this term, and there's many definitions out there. I personally like the last one, which is the ability to apply knowledge to manipulate one's environment or to think abstractly as measured by objective criteria such as tests. But regardless of definition, there's one bottom line, which is information is power and can give you leverage against your adversaries. I've included a photo of an actual failed CIA operation where they weaponized a cat, just to show you how far those adversaries are willing to go and spend resources towards compromising their victims. But the good thing is we can use the same type of methodologies they use in their intelligent development programs to identify them and stop them in their tracks as well. So there's many different types of intelligence domains. We've all heard of threat intelligence, about understanding your adversaries, how they operate, how they exploit your systems, what their tradecraft is, and why would they actually exploit your systems. But there's many other different sub-branch domains that we can also find, such as brand intelligence and who's trying to impersonate you to cause monetary or reputational loss, or fraud intelligence and who's trying to defraud you and how. Even vulnerability intelligence and what is my organization's threat surface when it comes to bugs in my production environments, and what type of priority and severity is associated with them. We all know, I mentioned Log4j, but how confident are we in potentially scanning and finding the next Log4j, or even for the services that are running our software in knowing that no such packages are delivered with them. And we also have operational intelligence in understanding how our users use our systems, whether it's to cut costs or reduce abuse. There's many different ones. And the core and foundation of building out an intelligence program is centered around three portions, which are developing your priority intelligence requirements and speaking to all your customers and stakeholders and inferring what their biggest concerns are to their systems, processes, and functions. Then the security function can take those and they can distill them into more answerable questions that are broken down. And by collection requirements that answer those specific questions, which we can integrate, and we can create specific action plans to actually drive decision-making, which we should never enforce, as the whole idea of intelligence products is we put security in the hands of our engineers and we don't enforce things that might be disruptive or destructive to the actual business itself. The final one is a shared responsibility piece, which is very important as it establishes partnership in between those functions. So, nothing good is, it wouldn't be good if there's no example, so I decided to, create one where the product operations team requires information on methods on which malicious actors are abusing our services and using them maliciously. And we can break that down as a requirement to create information requirements that are more targeted questions, such as what brute force scripts can we identify across the deep and dark web or Telegram channels or whatever it might not be that's referencing our publicly facing infrastructure. Or how many of our existing customer credentials are available in public, data breaches and dumps? Or what type of volumetric data do we have on our perimeter that might signal some form of credential stuffing, right? Now that we have those questions, we can start looking for the data in support of those questions so we can answer them. For example, we can create a collection requirement around some form of Yara signatures that we deploy in VirusTotal to find popular brute force scripts such as OpenBullet that are referencing our infrastructure. We can configure triggers on the deep and dark web for notifications when somebody's mentioning us and hacked accounts or compromised credentials. We can create some form of active monitoring for any of our customers in being present in Have I Been Pwned in any public database dumps. or we can even sample some of our Cloudflare web application firewall logs in order to identify if the Pareto principle is in place, where 20% of our top talkers in terms of infrastructure represent 80% of the potential malicious traffic, right? And after we've compiled this, we can also even have machine learning models for what's baseline user behavior versus anomalies, what is expected versus what is not. Because in order to fight evil, you must know what good looks like first. After that, we can take this and we can integrate it into our systems, and we can create those action plans to either suspend the accounts or even suspend the infrastructure trying to access them in order to mitigate or reduce the blast radius. But even if we develop 20 or 50 priority intelligence requirements and we prioritize them, intelligence does not mean threat prevention completeness. And we kind of want to be a bit more proactive, and that's where threat modeling comes in, where we take, we disassemble the actual systems and we look at them end to end, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you might not be targeted because you're the prime target, but as stepping stone to such. There's many different frameworks out there, such as more older ones like Stride, Pasta, attack trees, playing cards, whatnot. But it turns out ACME Corp wanted something that's a lot more closer to the software development lifecycle, so that they can integrate it as a portion of the development process, such as test-driven development, in the part of where people use security in the design and create systems which are hardened from the beginning, right? So how would we convey this to our developers, which aren't necessarily security experts like us? Well, they're kind of used to doing user stories, so why not create malicious user stories in the form of threat scenarios, where we can start asking those end-to-end questions, and how do people get access to our systems? What can they do with that access over there? What can they do to laterally move to other systems that are closer to the crown jewels, and how can they evade our defenses? Those are just some examples. They're not a finite, infinite. There's not a finite list of everything that you can potentially ask, but they're a good starting point in driving those discussions. We obviously need a way to prioritize all the threat scenarios and basically have a way to highlight what is the worst versus what does not constitute additional measures being required, so we can start scoring them. We can use things such as the threat scenario severity in it manifesting, the business impact it can have, the complexity required for its exploitation, and the likelihood of it being prioritized from an adversary to achieve somebody's objective. We can obviously use also the existing controls to formulate a more concrete view of what the threat surface for the actual application is. And afterwards, the cool thing is we can take a look at all the scenarios and what attack miter techniques are comprised to create a map, which effectively is a taxonomy of all the techniques and which are the most prevalent ones, so we can prioritize control recommendations, so that there's some economy of scale when you're dealing with threats at a larger scale, right? And what would be an example also for some threat scenarios? For example, somebody might want to get access to the API service for ACME Corp to a remote code execution in order to obtain a foothold into ACME Corp's environment, where from a score of 1 to 5, very simple, they have a significant severity and significant confidentiality, integrity, availability, impact, direct access to privileged systems, confirmed business impact, extended actions required to actually remediate it, somewhat more tailored exploitation, with good recon, and high value asset being compromised, so high likelihood, as it's a stepping stone to such, with some form of controls but not too many. The relevant attack techniques are the following, and effectively you can recommend that maybe there's some hardening that can be done, or pen tests, or even monitoring of command execution, right? But what if we list out 5 initial access scenarios and we miss out 2 of them, right? Well, the good thing is we can say, okay, when they have access already to these systems, what can they do? And the next one is about detonation of customer devices, where they already have pre-existing access to the API service and they just push out a scheduled job. So max severity, destructive nature, potentially impacting human lives, max business impact, catastrophic monetary reputational loss, low complexity, they're already there, and all the tokens and service calls are available on the system, and max likelihood because it's high value for low effort and absolutely no controls, right? A perfect storm and a perfect 100. So we can, do some type of recommendations on how we can put some controls, such as 2-step verification for privileged actions, or PKI, or monitoring privileged calls. There's many different ways. And the good thing is a good threat hunting function in a SOC can actually take a threat model, and now with the extended threat surface, they can start hunting in a hypothesis-driven way, where a good threat hunt is one which is structured, well-scoped, and goal-oriented. And I pretty much wanted, I like Palantir's alerting detection strategy, and I'm trying to promote it as much as possible, but it's one which effectively allows you to drive hunting engagements and produce monitoring solutions as well. So how does it look like? Very briefly, effectively, you have a high-level goal of detecting malicious scheduled remote detonation jobs for a large volume of customers with the relevant attack MITRE techniques. There's a strategy abstract that describes that maybe there's a rabbit MQ jobs being pushed, which are going above a 2-week moving average. Some technical context about the SPL or whatever searching language you're using, with some blind spots and assumptions that the logs are being forwarded, and false positives such as on Monday when everybody wants to explode everything, and detailed validation steps on how you can maybe use a Lambda function to do continuous control validation with the potential response of halting all the queue, the job processing queue, and paging out the API team until it's resolved, right? So, but wait, how is this different from regular alerts, right? Targeted hunting engagements can produce alerts, but they shouldn't be the focus. More often than not, when we do some form of alert generation, we're overzealous with our allow listing, and those create pretty much gaps that more sophisticated adversaries can exploit. And it's usually a lot better to catch everyone eventually than to catch only some instantly. So we as threat hunters, and that's why I put continuous threat hunting, should be doing one thing specifically and not using our keyboards and browsing to many systems to do validation. We should let automation and robots do that for us. We should be diving into data and searching for the anomalies before the alert review cycle is happening, because more often than not, we can actually miss things. So it's the data that's surfacing up potential bad things, and there are ways that we can do this. One of the things that we actually prioritize in ACME Corp as well is effectively going and venturing in as a threat analyst into the data mine, for example, where you can look at all the PowerShell events in one environment, which are good for some, blue sky research, but they're way too noisy usually. But what an analyst can do is they can create more refined haystacks where the chance of there being a needle inside is much larger, such as, for example, PowerShell command executions with more than 200 characters. Now that's a lot better for now, digging in deeper. And over time, effectively, after we transform, multiply, and transition this, we can effectively create concrete signatures by multiplying those, for example, and searching for the keyword Mimikatz in the refined haystack, and we can potentially create different variations of it to have something that is a good place to start your incident response. Now, by creating multiple of these haystacks, now you can tag the data sources based on their MITRE attack techniques to create chains of exploitation paths that you can link together for more advanced correlation. But obviously, none of this would ever be possible without the biggest enabler, which is automation, where it saves time, and whether you're using Slack-bot notifications to potentially help engineers and deliver the security of their products within their hands, or infrastructure as code to manage your alerting fleet, or even Sigma to abstract away from complex SIM-specific language. Automation saves time and it allows hunters to do what they should be doing, which is hunting for those threats and digging through data. That is pretty much all I had. I know it was a pretty quick one. Thank you very much. If you are looking for any opportunities, please take a look at our website, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions in the audience?
If nobody wants to ask questions, I'll be at the stands after, so you can guys talk to me as well.
One question over here. Oh, sorry.
Hello. So what is your opinion on what a company using a traditional SOC model should focus on at first in order to make it easier for it to transition to a future SOC model?
That's a very good question. Basically, one of the things that I think is extremely important is developing, it's a non-technical thing where you have to develop the trust with your partners to ensure that they can support you in your journey in transiting over, so that you can delegate some of those responsibilities in building things securely, because if the Security Operations Center is responsible for 100 services, we only have a limited amount of human resource that we can handle all of them, so we'd always be a bottleneck. For example, if you're tasked with doing the threat modeling for 100 services, then basically the production of those systems and development so that they can go in a secure state to customers is going to be severely hampered. So we need to create this shared responsibility model where we convey that it's in, we want to help you, but you have to help us as well. And education is a big portion of it. Automation definitely is something that also helps in making sure that analysts are not bogged down by a lot of false positive alerts and determining what is something that is truly malicious versus what can be looked at a later stage. Frequently, we might get examples of privileged access being used for some server. Correlation between IT change management systems, and those can delegate some of that responsibility to the robots so that we don't need to deal with triaging thousands and thousands of alerts, and we can focus on expanding the corpus of what other bad things can be happening.
Yeah, thanks.